Hello and welcome to our second Startup Women webinar of 2024, Navigating the World of Grants. I'm Isabel Nolan. I'm the Program Manager for the Startup Women and Startup Global programs here at Startup Canada. To begin, I would like to acknowledge that the land on which I'm on today is located on the unceded and traditional territories of the Musqueam, Squamish and Tsleil-Waututh Nations, also known as Vancouver. And as we are a national organisation, I would also like to acknowledge with respect the diverse histories and cultures of all Indigenous peoples. And I encourage you to take a moment to acknowledge the traditional territory that you're residing on today. We welcome everyone to connect with each other in the chat. Make sure you are sending your messages to everyone in the room. Zoom defaults it so that you're only sending it to the hosts and panelists. So that's just a small setting you need to change in the chat so that you're chatting to everyone. Today's session is being recorded and we'll be adding it to our YouTube channel afterwards as a living resource. So a little bit about Startup Canada if you're not familiar with us. We're a national nonprofit that is the gateway to Canada's entrepreneurial ecosystem. We're here to connect entrepreneurs with the support, community, and tools that they need to build a successful business in Canada. Since launching in 2012, Startup Canada has grown to support more than 130,000 entrepreneurs annually and an ever-growing community of ecosystem partners from coast to coast to coast. Dedicated to showing up for women all year round, Startup Women is an annual program offering support to early-stage women identifying entrepreneurs across Canada through topic-focused webinars like this, industry advisory circles, and meetings with Startup Women leaders. We know that when you support women, you support a nation. Before we get started, we have a short message from one of our co-presenting partners, the Scotiabank Women Initiative.
The Scotiabank Women Initiative is dedicated to your success on your terms.
I'm shaping our industry's vision for the future.
I can expand my business without borrowing from my family.
I know I can face anything, thanks to my network.
I'm ready for my next chapter.
I'm inspiring future leaders.
I'm making sure my family's future is secure.
Define your success, and we'll help you achieve it. With unbiased access to capital and tailored solutions, bespoke specialized education, and holistic advisory services and mentorship. Join our community of women today, the Scotiabank Women Initiative.
Thank you so much. I've just seen we have someone joining from Yellowknife. Amazing. Thank you so much for joining. So many people around Canada coming in. We've got Montreal, so Winnipeg. It's so wonderful to be able to reach so many entrepreneurs throughout Canada. So thank you all so much for coming, and keep coming into the chat, but just make sure you're talking to everyone. So I also would very quickly like to thank our other co-presenting partner, UPS, our program partners, EDC, Mastercard, and YSpace, as well as our community of ecosystem partners. We have a lot of them, so we'll add a full list of them into the chat for you. So today's conversation will be focusing on the complex landscape of grants. What is and isn't fundable through a grant, where you can find and apply for these grants that are applicable to your business, crucial do's and don'ts, and practical steps to crafting a winning proposal to secure that financial support that you need for your entrepreneurial vision. We have some prepared questions for our wonderful panelists today. However, if you do have a question, you can write it into the Q&A box on the bottom function bar on your screen, and we'll do our best to have it answered live. So without further ado, I am honored to introduce our speakers today. So we have Deb Flanagan, who is the founder of Bizzidy. Deb is an entrepreneur and grant writer, and she loves finding money for women entrepreneurs who are starting or growing their business. A proud mom, speaker, and presenter, she is a passionate cheerleader and resource champion who enjoys connecting and empowering others with big hearts and big dreams. Her company, Bizzidy, is a bold business model harnessing the power of technology to deliver financial power, huge value, and access for women founders. We also have Stephanie Sang joining us here today. Stephanie is the founder and grant angel for Granted Consulting. Stephanie is known as a grant angel across Canada, And since 2011, Grant has supported thousands of clients and generated more than 100 million in grant funding at a success rate of 92%. As many don't learn about grants in school, Stephanie is passionate about educating the business and community on all you need to know about accessing grants for growth. She's also a co-host of a podcast, Serenity Now for Entrepreneurs, board member of BC Food and Beverage, and an investor with Women's Equity Lab and Coralus. Some mighty credentials for both of you. Congrats and welcome to today's discussion. We have a lot to cover in the next hour, and I know our attendees are probably itching to kind of just get started with learning more on this topic. I do also want to highlight for everyone that is attending today, or if you're watching this recording on a later date, today's discussion will be focused towards early stage entrepreneurs. So just wanted to kind of give you that scope. So a lot of the grants that we'll be talking about will be for that kind of early stage business. So I think to start off our conversation, I do think it's important for us to perhaps define grants and differentiating it from the other avenues of funding. And Stephanie, I'll pass it over to you for this one. I know you have a slide to share.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you, Isabel. So in speaking about grants, what I love to do is just ensure that the audience has a leveling of information when it comes to what is considered grantable versus where you would look for other funding in terms of loans. So just put this slide up and you'll have access to it in the recording. But if you'd like a copy of it, just let Isabel know, and I'm sure that Startup Canada will share it as well. So you can see that on the left-hand side, there's clear, programs that would be applicable to apprenticeships and certifications, helping on the innovation side. Marketing is really outside of Canada. And then, of course, things like training and wages. Now, one thing I wanted to point out is you'll see some duplication of a few of these categories from the left side to the right. So while consulting could be a grantable activity, there's limited programs and limited type of consulting that you'd be able to get funding for. Similarly with innovation, you can see on the left side, it's when you're in a prototype stage. So you're just developing your product, you're at the point when you haven't gone and sold it yet, but then it moves over to the right side under loans once you have commercialized. And another one to just point out is, especially in marketing, there's more funding available for business owners where they're expanding internationally. So not within Canada, but taking their products or services outside of Canada, versus it would probably be more on the loan side. If you're looking to expand, say, for example, from BC to Alberta, or from New Brunswick to Quebec, whatever it might be. So just keeping that in mind. Unfortunately, one big area that we often will get questions about is capital expenditures. And you'll see that it's on the loan side. And the reason is because capital expenditures tend to be considered operational, which means if you are a moving company and you need a moving truck, that's what you need in order to run your business. So the government grant programs tend not to support operational costs. And as a result of that, you'll see that more on the loan side. So just important to level up on this because I think there's a lot of misunderstandings when it comes to, starting out my business, I need to get rent, I need to, pay for a vehicle, or I need to pay for a piece of equipment. And unfortunately, it's probably more on the loan side than it is on the grant side. The silver lining is that there are specific loan programs for women as well. And so the opportunity is to be able to tap into those programs as you continue to grow your business.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Stephanie. I think it gives our attendees a really great picture of what is fundable with a grant and then versus what isn't, so that they can have a better sense of perhaps how they can tap into these grants, or what grants they can tap into. Deb, I wanted to, kind of start you off with why do you think entrepreneurs should be considering for applying for grants, and what are the key benefits that they can get from all the grants that are out there for Canadian entrepreneurs?
Well, I I want to thank Stephanie for that really great slide that kind of directs us into this conversation extremely well. So thank you. I much appreciated. I think in terms of early stage entrepreneurship, we can feel that it's somewhat restricted in terms of what's available. But I would encourage people to continue to look at the grants and find out where they can start to manage small grants really well and build up that traction, build up that reputation, and flex that muscle around how to write effectively and obtain successfully a grant for their business. So I think it was 2024, I believe so. The Women's Entrepreneurship Knowledge Hub, they put out a report, excuse me, talking about the top 5 business obstacles for women entrepreneurs. And they were finance related. So not all businesses can take on debt. And that was acknowledged by Stephanie in the beginning, in the starting stages, but know that that transition, like she had suggested, is absolutely there and available when the business is ready, when the owner founder is ready, and that grants do exist. Sometimes we have to get like super creative outside of what the government is offering, and find those spaces.
Thanks so much, Deb. And you know, as this is part of the Startup Women program, you know, I'm assuming a majority of our attendees and folks that are watching this afterwards most likely identify as a woman. But Stephanie, can you come and talk about perhaps like the misunderstanding of applying for grants that are specifically for a woman-owned business?
I love this question because I started this business 12 years ago thinking there's got to be specifically, you know, programs just for women. I'm BIPOC, you know, immigrant from Asia. And so there's got to be a boatload of funding that's available to, you know, specific demographics. And I fit a few of these different categories. And the reality is that it doesn't quite work that way. So while every so often you will see non-government sources like some banks, maybe some credit unions or some organizations like a UPS, for instance, they may have specific programs for women. I will say that those programs are smaller in dollar amount, so they're usually within a few $1,000s, and they really don't have anything specific to do with the fact that you are female. Like there's something that's driving that, so it is your growth of your business, etc. And so often the grants that people will apply for are ones that are gender agnostic, right? So hiring grants and training grants, market expansion, maybe some R&D programs. So it's really important to understand that many of the grants are not demographically driven, with one exception, and that I would say is the Indigenous community. So there are specific programs that are set out for Indigenous community members, as they should be. And the opportunity is obviously whether you are, you know, women or identify as such, but if you are Indigenous, then there's a specific pot of funding that you could be tapping into. But otherwise, I think the big misunderstanding is women business owners get a benefit, in particular with regards to grants, and that's not quite the case. I've seen loan programs that are geared towards women entrepreneurs, and those that are BIPOC, but I haven't seen anything that's, you know, purely just for women grants. There's one small program that was in 2018, but that came and went really quickly.
Yeah, thank you so much for clarifying that, Stephanie. And so, okay, once we've kind of like outlined those pieces and you know the pros of applying for grants and what can we be applying for, Deb, what would you say are some effective strategies in finding those grant opportunities across Canada? You know, whether it's through your business or any other tools and resources.
So I think there's some really effective strategies that early stage women identifying entrepreneurs can grasp and build on. And that's really looking at the databases that exist already and really maximizing the use of the filters. So if you go onto Canada's Business Benefits Finder, a database to find grants, the more focused you can get around who you are, what you bring to the table in terms of your products or services, and where you want to go in terms of growth or project or idea, the better results you're going to get. So I'd say just working with the tools that are there and learning them. I think learning about the world of grants is a little challenging because there's lingo, there's buzzwords, there's sector specific language that we get tangled up in sometimes, like financial acuity, incorporation. Sometimes we just don't have access to what that language means, and that could be a barrier to anybody effectively looking for funding and moving forward with that. So I think another thing is consider talking to a professional grant writer. All of the grant writers I've met have been helpers, and we like to match people with money. So absolutely reach out and consider looking for specialists. So on my team, I have somebody who only does grants for music or the creative arts. And not all grant organizations can focus on those and know those grant opportunities well. So there is some specialization.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much, Deb. And I think, I think a lot of entrepreneurs will agree that finding grants and writing grants is a full-time job. And so I think leaning on those people that are specialists within that field, it can really help them in being successful with these opportunities. Stephanie, can you tell us a little more about Granted and how you're helping entrepreneurs find relevant grants for their business?
Absolutely. So we are driven by helping small, medium-sized businesses in Canada. And we do it in a couple of different ways. So the smaller businesses would utilize the technology that we built. It's called Get Granted. And it matches through intelligent matching the right grants for your business. So if you're in Yellowknife, you're not going to be receiving grant information for programs that are specifically for BC or for Quebec. It also allows you to select the type of grant. So as Deb was saying, important to identify exactly what you're doing in your business. It might be hiring, so you can select hiring and it would just curate that list for you. So that technology is available. We started it before COVID. It was really helpful during COVID to notify businesses of grant changes, especially during that difficult time. The level up from there is called Granted Starter, and that allows for businesses to leverage our expertise on a select number of grants. And I think really for startup, early stage, that's probably the leveling that you would potentially need. And then for larger companies that are 20, 25 people plus, probably a couple $1 million in revenues, then we have our Granted Pro, which allows our team to be your fractional grant department, manage the entire grant search and research process, as well as your claims. So we've got 3 different levels of service, and it's just a matter of, sometimes companies will level up from starter to pro. Sometimes, there's a lull in their business, so they'll go from pro down to starter or even down to Get Granted. But the goal of the technology is to keep businesses informed of new grants that match your business, as well as grant changes, because it's so important that you don't assume what you submitted last year is going to be positively, successfully received this year, especially if there are grant changes that have taken place in between. One of the grants that we've worked on since 2014 changed 114 times in 7 years. They don't even know that. Right. So it's really important to make sure that you're looking at grants on a regular basis and taking care of, the activities that your business is investing in anyway.
Yeah, it's definitely a fast moving pace that these grants, and they'll go up and then they'll be taken right back down like even a few days after as well. So it's definitely incredibly useful to be able to track all of those grants. I can see that we have some questions coming to the Q&A box. I do see them, so I will make some time to get to as many of them as we can. I think before I go on to our next batch of questions, Stephanie, would you mind sharing your screen again with that slide? I think we have a few attendees that wanted to kind of visualize it a little bit better. So we'll keep that up for a few minutes. If you want to take a screenshot, I will also share this with our attendees after today as well. So if you don't get it, we will share it with you. So I think a big part of grants, once you have done your research and, you've used a tool such as Business Benefits Finder, is understanding the eligibility for this grant. And Deb, can I tap into you to talk about, is there common eligibility criteria for most of these grants? And, how crucial is it for a business to be meeting each piece of criteria for these grants?
So as Stephanie alluded to, the grants are varied and often change. So what I can say to that is there are some very vague general groupings that you want to look for in terms of eligibility. And it's going to be crucial to meet this. Otherwise, you can get to the end of a grant application and realize that there really wasn't an eligibility fit and you've just spent time, effort, and money in getting to that point. So back it up. In terms of eligibility, we might look at things, or we might see things rather, like gender, business structure, incorporated, not incorporated. How long have you been incorporated? Do you have a set of financial records that the grant application is going to require? Are you a racialized person? Sometimes there are grants like Black Opportunity Fund has some grants available to Black-owned, Black-serving businesses inside their programs. So that's one way to kind of get at one of the grants. So yeah, I think it's really crucial to meet the eligibility requirements. If you think about the grantor on the other side of the table, looking at this big, massive pile of grant applications, you're going to want to stand out by meeting eligibility. And then, as I'm sure we'll talk about a little bit later, crafting a successful application to get noticed. If I may, I'm thinking about the CDAP, the grant from the Canadian Digital Adoption Program. Fabulous in many ways for many organizations, but limited in scope. It provides administration. You can, I think, get up to $2,400 to boost e-commerce, to get online, to do some marketing. Fabulous, right? To digitize all of your operations. Absolutely wonderful. But I've had people go through this application to realize that at some point, oh dear, there are some eligibility requirements that weren't seen at the beginning. So, for example, for the new iteration of the CDAP grant, the person needs to obtain approval from, let's say, a digital marketer. So get a price, pay for it out of pocket, and then get reimbursed. And then also have had employed one other person. So a lot of my clients just absolutely don't fit. It would be great to build out their marketing scheme, but it's not going to happen because they're not there. They're not ready to hire somebody, and they're not ready to put out that thousands of dollars in order to qualify or be eligible for the grant.
Okay, interesting. Thank you so much, Deb. Yeah, definitely feels like you really have to understand exactly what the grant is and what you are applying for, ensuring that you meet that criteria, but then also ensuring that you are ready to take it on and to kind of put the program in motion, if you will, for these grants. Thank you so much, Stephanie. I'm gonna I hope everyone got that. But like I said, we will share that with our attendees afterwards, as well as any links that we share in the chat as well. We'll send that to you afterwards as well. And the YouTube recording will be up in about 2 days. So we have you covered. Don't worry if you miss any notes. We will certainly make sure that you don't miss anything. So a question I kind of want to put to both of you is the application process. So, and Stephanie, I'll go to you first. What are some of the main components of a grant application, and how can entrepreneurs prepare for that? And kind of keeping in mind, we're talking about early stage
Early
entrepreneurs.
stage, yeah. I think it's actually really important to first understand that the application process is not like writing a test in school, because often, people would be like, oh, I have 80% of the answers. I'll just fill that in. And the 20%, well, I've at least got 8 out of 10 on the test. So it's not quite like that, right? You want to make sure that is a complete application. So when you're looking at the application, one step before that is to actually look at the program's mandate and what it is that they're trying to achieve at this particular program. So if it's for, say, for example, creating a valuable learning experience for a student, and in a particular genre or sector that they are studying in, then the application should speak to how this hiring grant would be able to be relevant to that particular student's career goals and or industry growth. So one, example that I often like to share is market expansion. I mean, there are market expansion grants like the Can Export program. It's on hiatus right now, but it may come back. And it encourages business to export outside of Canada. Sometimes the trade shows, though, take place that are most relevant to a business, take place in Canada. And so understanding that even though you might be marketing to international attendees of this conference or trade show in Canada, it doesn't meet the criteria because you do need to be doing the marketing in that specific market. So it's you might think, oh, well, this is reasonable, but the guidelines are really, really clear in terms of how you would provide that information. And often we've seen companies, because they've not looked at that, they put an application in and then they've been rejected, and often they come to us because they're like, we were rejected for this, what do you think? And it's often because the eligibility criteria wasn't looked at properly, then the chances of you being able to reapply means that a new application needs to be genred up. So making sure that you are addressing the mandate, making sure that you're filling in the criteria. Sometimes they will ask for documentation, as Deb mentioned, if you need to be incorporated or you need to show that your business is in existence. This is a pro tip that I will share with all of you, because some of you may be in a position of, I don't know exactly what business I'm starting yet. I'm still in ideation. I'm going to say register your business provincially. So every province has its own, kind of organization that manages business registration. So choose a name, even if it's a numbered company or something that's quite unique, get that approved, because often the grantors, some of the programs would say you need to show that your business has existed for at least a year. And I'm going to argue that starting a business starts with that ideation, thinking about your target market, thinking about who you could serve, what your product or service is going to be. That's when my business started. And I'm sure some of you are in that state right now. If you apply for your registration, and it's often less than $100. Like in BC, it's a name, registration, approval, and then sole proprietorship is the easiest way. You start with that. Then in 6 or 9 months, when you're ready to hire a first person or invest in training, you're 6 or 9 months ahead of being able to apply for certain grants. So just a tip in terms of like to get that tenure going, especially, and you can always change your mind. You can always say, oh, I was going to do consulting, but now I'm actually going to do a course instead. No one's going to really question that because a lot of companies have different streams of revenues, but not registering means that you're going to be possibly a full year behind other applicants who were not necessarily hugely active in their business, but had it registered properly.
Excellent tip, Stephanie. Thank you so much for that. Deb, how about you? Anything to add to that for the main components?
That was a gold tip. I love that. Yeah, totally makes sense, because once we get inside of a program, an incubator, an accelerator, we talk to other entrepreneurs. Sometimes our idea that we first had that was on that little napkin at that coffee shop shifts a little bit. So I really like that, Stephanie. Yeah, get it registered and allow the juices to flow and shift and change and pivot. And nobody knows for the better, but you have that track record of having registered that definite point in time. I love that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I see there's a few questions coming into the chat. If you could put into the Q&A box, because there's lots of action going on in the chat, so I want to make sure that I capture all of your questions in one place. So please put into the Q&A box, and we're going to save some time at the end to go through all of our attendees' questions. Okay, so writing tips. And Deb, I might lean heavily on you since, you know, with that incredible experience of being a grant writer. First of all, the do's and don'ts. What are some of these crucial do's and don'ts when it comes to writing a grant proposal?
Thank you. I'm thinking that I need to put this into some type of form, you know, so that people can get, because I have a lot of do's and don'ts. Please connect at www.bizzidy.com, and one day I'll make that and you'll have that available. So so there's a couple pieces of crucial info that I thought about, and it's, what do you really want to do with your business, and is it reasonable? And then how that connects to fit and eligibility, etc. So you might want to explore the numerous reasons for applying for funding, whatever that looks like. That may be hiring your first staff member, that may be gaining a little bit of inventory that you need, that may be moving from your basement apartment to a bricks and mortar location, and taking entrepreneurship to the next level. So having said all of that, that can encompass one idea, but one grant is not going to cover all of that. So I think just accepting that there are probably a number of different grants that need to be applied for to meet all of that criteria is probably best.
Mm-hmm.
I think the other thing is to really be honest and ask yourself if you have the time and the resources to manage the grant, not just the grant writing, but the follow-up. So the government wants to make sure that the money that is granted to organizations, businesses, is being spent wisely. So there's reporting mechanisms after the money is given. There's reporting mechanisms that happen over the course of sometimes a year up to many more years, depending on the length of the relationship. So you really want to make sure that you're prioritizing the reporting and the management of the grant. And that just really shows that you are accountable and administratively and financially capable of handling a grant. And that could do very well for you in the future if you apply for other grants. I think that's about, those are the top couple of tips that I'm thinking of.
Thank you so much, Deb. Am I right in thinking that, you know, once you kind of unlock one grant, it helps you then to go further and okay, you have this track record of getting approved and for this grant and spending the money wisely and reporting back correctly. It then helps you with any future grant proposals as well.
I think so, because there are a lot of grant applications that allow you to use that data. So that be your brag bag. You know, last year I had a grant with the government for whatever dollar amount, successfully executed, reported, managed, and it just shows trust and ability. So yeah, I think it definitely is.
Thank you. And can you talk a little bit about, you know, like your business? And I think you have an app being launched shortly. So if you could tell us a little bit more about that and you know how you're supporting entrepreneurs in writing these grants.
So like Stephanie, I saw a need to support businesses, women identifying organizations particularly were coming to me saying, there's nothing out there that I can really connect with. So we've built a very robust database, and that was going to show folks what grants are available, and the methods that they can get toward writing effectively, and the support that they need on the back end if they want one of the grant writers off my team to help them take it home. So yeah, we're very excited. We're going to be launching today. So I'd like to announce today that we're launching the Bizzidy grant app, and at www.bizzidy.com/waitlist. So come and join us there, and you'll get the first insight into where we're going with all this. So it's very exciting. We'll hope to democratize some access around finding out what grants are out there, how to do it well, and how to get the money in your pocket so you can start and grow and scale and realize all the dreams that you have for your business.
Thank you so much, Deb. And
Thanks, Isabel.
my coworker has shared the link in the chat. So for our
thanks,
attendees, you can go into that link as well. And then I also want to share with our attendees, as well as anyone that's watching this recording afterwards, Stephanie has very generously offered a discount to using the granted consulting services. So we shared it earlier, but we'll share the link again in the chat, that offers you a discount to use their services if you're part of the Startup Women and Startup Canada community. So thank you so much, Stephanie, as well, for providing that with our community with that. Okay, I had a few more questions, but we've got quite a lot of attendee questions, and so I think I'll just switch over to that if that's okay with our speakers. So first question I have is from Kate, and they're wondering, a lot of grants prioritize growth and or innovation. What do they consider growth if it's not also operational equipment and domestic marketing? Who would like to take that?
I'll kick that one off. So I just want to be really clear that a lot of the growth related programs that I've seen that are larger in size, so we're talking six figures, like $100,000 plus, they're really looking for organizations that are well established and think a little bit about what the government would want to see out of this. So it'd be increased revenues for sure, but it's also the return on investment. So if they're giving you $100,000 and you say, we're going to grow $60,000 in sales, that return on investment is negative. The other thing that the government will look to is whether or not you are able to capture more of a market share from international competitors. So could we have a domestic source for growth here to reduce the amount of imports that we have? So that's another consideration. And the final one I'll say is job creation. So the Canadian government is mandated and expected to create jobs in Canada. And so if the growth that is being, the growth program is being looked at in a way that supports government initiatives, the number of people that you hire on in Canada, right? This is important because I think a lot of businesses are looking to hire people from offshore. It might be a little bit cheaper, et cetera. But what they're looking for is, hiring Canadians or PRs or protected persons within Canada, and making sure that that is the type of growth that they're able to get. So when you look at the application guidelines, and again, every grant's going to be a little bit different, that's kind of the area. When it comes to innovation, it is novel innovation. So novel is defined in a couple of different ways. One could be, is it available here in Canada? And it might be available in Asia or in Europe, but it's not available here in Canada. You may be the first adopter. That could be considered innovation. However, often they'll say, is this relatively new and different from what is available in the market generally? So if you're just taking a few different technologies that already exist, say for example Google, and maybe your CRM system, your customer relation management system, and creating something that just pairs those two things together, that type of API is what that's called. That already exists likely, so there's not innovative enough. So it does have to be quite unique and novel. It's definitely not changing your muffins from chocolate chip to blueberry. That doesn't work super well.
Thank you so much, Stephanie, for answering that question. Deb, I believe this next one might be pointed towards you. So Tasha is asking, I'm interested in information on using AI or ChatGPT for applications. Of particular interest is how to use them without the program stealing or using this information to train itself and then use it to inform another business. And they're asking because they had a bad experience with something like this. So I don't know if you want to touch on that.
So that's a really great question. And I'm kind of at that intersection too as I build the Bizzidy app. So I think it's about the ethics and the morality around using AI and how to be sure that that what you create is your own IP. So that gets a little bit tricky. I think at that point in time, you're looking at securing that IP with the help of a lawyer. So this is before you even get into the granting system. Because if your idea is not fully fleshed out, it's going to be hard to communicate that in any written documentation attached to your grant application. The other piece, I think, would be to connect with somebody who's in that tech space who may have experienced that. And the way to find those people, there's really great tech programs for women that have started up, Collisions next week. You know, so to be protective of your idea, but broad enough so that you can ask that question in those spaces. I'm finding that women entrepreneurs are generally very happy to help one another. So I don't doubt that you're going to find the answers inside those ecosystems.
Thank you so much, Deb. Tasha, I hope that answers your question. I'm so sorry that you had a bad experience. Okay, we're going to try fly through these. We've got about 10 minutes or so for these, and I thank you all so much for your questions. It's really important that we're hearing from you and answering any specific questions that you came with for today's session. Next question is from Vivian, and it's directed at Stephanie. So they say, "Hi Stephanie, can a client explore to all the 3 categories at the same time to available grants? I have referred one client recently, and the client is asking if what is the kind of feedback granted consulting will give to the clients after they explore the 3 categories."
So, sorry, the 3 categories of the services that we provide, is that what you mean?
I believe so. Yeah.
Yeah, it's either one or the other, right? So you're either doing your own grant applications with Get Granted, which, you know, at least it solves the problem of what do I qualify for, and what is new, or you are leveraging the second, which is Granted Starter, where you would be able to say, you know, you might be busy and not be able to apply for these on your own. There's a select number of grants that we can help with. And then Pro is leaving it to the pro. So it's, you know, we have dedicated grant consultants in specific genres and sectors. And so they know the grants inside and out for that particular sector. So then it's having them guide you through the year. So I don't imagine it would be beneficial. It might be a little bit confusing to try to trigger all 3, but we just have 3 different options of services depending on the level and need of the businesses that approach us.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. Vivian, I hope that answers your question. We have a few more. If you do have a question you would like answered, but we're going to do our best to get to all of them, please just put them in the Q&A box, and that's sort of how I'm ensuring that we get to them. So Mansi has asked, do you recommend registering even when you don't have any revenue? And I'm going to go ahead and just say yes. Register as soon as possible.
Register.
Yeah, just do
absolutely.
it. And to both Stephanie and Deb's point, you know, it then gives you that paper trail and that confirmation of being registered, so that, you know, in a year's time, 2 years' time, you can show when you're applying for these grants, this is when the business started, and it's cold hard proof that you have. So yes, is the answer there. Joni is asking, registering a business, just to be clear, is when you get your business number? Also, yes.
Yep. There's 2 different parts though. So one is provincially registered. There's a business, it's actually yeah, let's call it a business number. But then if you municipality wise need to register your business, you would need a business license. So you would usually register provincially first, and then depending on your municipality requirements, register. In Vancouver, for instance, even if you're a home-based business, you have to register a business license. So some of the grant programs are tied to, do you have a business license? And if you registered provincially, but you don't have a business license, that could be an issue for you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Stephanie. Next question, Patty. Will I still have to register in Manitoba, my province, if I am a numbered company in Canada?
No, you're federally registered, so that's fine.
All right, we're speeding through these. Anonymous attendee has asked, can a pre-seed or a seed business apply for a grant? What, in your opinion, is the best point in the timeline to start applying? As soon as possible, I'm going to say.
Deb, do you want to take this one?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Stephanie. So this is where some of this lingo comes in: pre-seed, seed, revenue making, et cetera. And it gets kind of confusing. But if you're talking pre-seed, you're probably not at the startup phase where you're looking for $500 or $2,000 or $10,000 for something. So you're in a little bit of a different headspace at that point. This is when you want to really look at eligibility. You want to look at what they're asking for and if you fit.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Deb. All right, let's see. Oh, Mary's asking, what advice do you have on creating a video to accompany your grant? We feel like we covered everything through our answers to the many questions. If we better understand the purpose of videos, it would help us to decide on content and tone. Is that even possible when applying for a grant?
To send in a video application instead of like a written application?
I think
I've seen
in addition to their application.
Those are probably larger applications where you may want to be able to, heighten exactly what it is. And there may be an opportunity for you to create a link where it points to this particular video. Maybe it has to do with, support within the community, things like that. But I've seen that more with nonprofit grants than I have with for-profit, unless we're talking multi six figures, in which case then it may be possible. The criteria will tell you whether or not that's allowed as well. So, they'll say supplementary documentation. They may be asking for a business plan. You don't want to just give them a video in lieu of a business plan. Like if they ask for a business plan, give them what they asked for, and make sure that it's updated. But I've seen, a range of different creative ways, and I love using video myself. So yeah.
Okay, great. Fantastic. Mary,
if I can just add a little bit to that. Yeah, Stephanie, you want to really look to see if they're going to allow for that, if there's space for that, right? One thing I've learned from some of the nonprofit granting organizations is they're looking to, for lack of a better word, democratize access to grant writing. So for Indigenous communities, for other racialized communities, for youth, for their applications, what I'm seeing is a little bit of a trend for those grant applications to be more accessible. So if someone doesn't have the capacity to write in English as requested, they can have someone help them create that grant application, and video might well be the answer to that. So we're seeing those barriers to the corporate speak, the certain very specific way of writing a grant. We're seeing that softening so that it's absolutely more accessible.
Thank you so much to both of you for that. I have an anonymous attendee asking how to manage the world of disability and grants, and they say in parentheses, while on government disability assistance. I don't want to fully assume their question, but what I'm understanding is juggling living with a disability and applying for grants. So Stephanie and Deb, I don't know if either of you have tips, and also attendee, if I'm misunderstanding your question, please send a follow-up. But Deb and Stephanie, any recommendations there?
I'd love to speak to that.
Yeah.
I have lived experience of having a disability and trying to navigate this entrepreneurial world. It's not easy. We're seeing granting bodies do some great work in terms of accessibility and inclusion. We're seeing racialized people having opportunities to apply for grants at different levels. What I'm not seeing enough of is that entryway, an easy entryway for someone who has a disability, who sees the potential and just needs a little bit of guidance. There are some provincial programs that suggest an easy pathway, but it's really outside of what is the normal or considered mainstream pathway to entrepreneurship. So I would personally like to see a little bit more of a weaving in of that as being, older women identifying entrepreneurs as well. Women who experience poverty, whether that's through disability or not. We need to include those folks. And so that's my challenge that I issue to organizations and ecosystems, because I know we can do it. And we don't want ideas to die on the table. There's just no reason for that. So
I'll just add a little bit in terms of what I've seen for accessibility. We've been seeing a lot more funding programs that make workplace more accessible, as well as hiring persons with disabilities.
yeah.
So I haven't seen as strong of a program. I think maybe through employment insurance, they may have specific programs for those who have disabilities and who want to start a business. I remember, probably 8 years ago. So I don't know if these programs still exist. But there are also resources that I've seen, usually accessible through different organizations. Like in BC, we have a program through the Works BC program, whereby if you need a hearing aid because you have a hearing impairment, that expense could be covered under their programs. So I don't know that it applies to the entrepreneur themselves, the employer, but I know for sure for team members it does. BC also has another program through Small Business BC that allows for increase of purchases of equipment that might be relevant to making a workplace more accessible. So things like maybe a monitor for someone who has some sight impairment that's unique, or a speaking computer that helps with those who have that difficulty. And so there's a range of different ways that you could be accessing that. But in terms of as a person with disability starting up a business, I haven't seen enough programs that support by way of a particular grant.
No, thank you both for answering that. And to the attendee that asked that question, I hope that gives you some sort of clarity around it. There is someone in the chat, Holly Johnston, who has said that they would like to connect with you, and they live in, what do they say? They live for and love to make the world more accessible and inclusive for those menstruators with increased barriers. So they would love to connect with you. So make sure that you reach out to Holly. All right. I'm just trying to see. We have quite a lot of questions. I won't get to all of them, unfortunately, so I'm doing my best to get
We'll need
through.
another session, Isabel.
I know. This was our highest registered and I think highest attended so far of the year.
Amazing.
Or ever. So yeah, I hear our community loud and clear. They need more information on grants. So let me see. Okay, someone has asked, are there grants in Alberta specifically for working towards keeping seniors in the community, or grants for private for-profit businesses? Are either of you familiar?
We only work with businesses that are private for profit. So that, we've existed for 12 years. So there's definitely funding available. And in a range of different ways, right? Alberta has a really great program called Alberta Innovates, and it covers some hiring grants, some innovation stuff. It is a little bit more on the techie side, but manufacturers, energy sector, like they have tapped into that funding for sure. In terms of the first part of the question, I would say unlikely for a for-profit business to be able to access that funding, more so for a nonprofit. So partnering up as a for-profit organization where you see an opportunity, partnering up with a nonprofit organization who has a similar mandate and is driven towards similar goals to what project you want to put out there could be the best way to access that, because there are programs that nonprofits could access more so than for-profit organizations.
All right, I hope that answers your question. I have a question here from Trisha. They're saying, I'm Indigenous, still learning about grant writing. If I hire a grant writer, am I able to put their pay percentage within the amount awarded?
Really great question that I get all the time because I want to try to help as many people as I can. And sometimes the grant writer fee is the barrier to getting the grant written. So that's why at Bizzidy, we're leaning on some technology and building this app. So that the app's going to do a little bit more heavy lifting in terms of bringing the cost down. There still is a cost. I'm not seeing any government grants that allow you to factor in that fee. Sometimes the fee comes from private investment. If you have a little bit of savings, friends and family, or a loan. I know that's not a fit. Debt is not a fit for a lot of people. So I think it's just a matter of maybe even looking for different types of grants. I think it's closed, but TELUS had a grant. There's the Cartier Women's Initiative. They allow you to use the grant money in whatever way you want, which is like super cool. I'm not sure if that's still open for this year. Hence, do some funding strategy planning so you know what's going on next year.
Okay, thank you so much, Deb. Trisha. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah.
I'm afraid that is all we have time for. I know we had a lot more questions. So my team member Miriam is in the background saving all these questions, and we'll do our best to get back to you individually. So I have a very quick feedback poll. I would love to hear back from our attendees on how you found today's session. Any ways we can improve this experience for you. And we always want to ensure this is as valuable and engaging as we can possibly make it. I would like to give a massive thank you to our speakers, Stephanie and Deb. Thank you so much for donating your time and your wealth of knowledge to today's session. I've certainly learned a lot, so I think that our attendees are also walking away a little bit more equipped with understanding this landscape and having a better sense of how they can navigate it. I want to thank our attendees for all the incredible questions. I wish we could have gotten to them all, but it's incredibly useful for us to know, why you've come to today's session, what are your specific questions, and also, for future planning as well. I think I'll definitely be covering another grant session, and maybe we can make it longer next time. So thank you to everyone that attended today, or if you're watching this recording as well, thank you so much for taking the time out. So very quickly, big thank you to our co-presenting partners, the Scotiabank Women Initiative and UPS, our program partners, EDC, Mastercard, and YSpace, and our ever-growing community of ecosystem partners. Our next webinar will also be in the realm of funding, except we'll be talking about bank loans and debt. So if you're interested in learning about the ins and outs of applying for a loan, definitely check that out. We'll put the registration link in the chat. It's already in there. And thank you to everyone that is answering the feedback poll as well. We'll keep it open for a few more minutes. But thank you again to everyone who attended today. And we hope to see you again soon. And please feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions at all.
Go and get granted.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you, Deb. Thank you so much, Stephanie.
Thank you.
Yeah.